Hello and welcome to Friday with the Chakontas. I am Mr. Chakonta
And I'm Mrs. Chakonta.
and we're back with FWTC Reacts.
Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to all our returning subscribers. Thank you for following us on Instagram, on TikTok, on Facebook, and for subscribing to our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
If you're new, I hope you are going to like our discussion today. And if you do, please do follow or do subscribe and share as well.
Yeah, and we're on what platforms did you say?
We're on YouTube as it is. Then we've got TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram.
And YouTube Music though.
Oh yes, I'm also
Yeah.
on YouTube. YouTube Music is our new latest one.
Yeah. So you can just search FWT podcast, FWTC podcast. And find all the episodes there.
Awesome. So before I get into the story, just let's say trigger warning or trigger warning. So it's gonna go straight into talking about a death of a loved one. So just trigger warning before I start reading the story. It's going to talk about death of a loved one.
Yeah, go ahead.
And the story goes like this. Our mother was buried during, please could you help with this situation? Our mother was buried during the Easter weekend after being unwell for a couple of months. Immediately after her burial, our stepfather chased us and now he's staying with his girlfriend and her 4 kids from wherever. The house was built by our father and after his death, it became our mother's house. Now that our mother is no more, the house belongs to our stepfather who kicked us out. We're now staying with our unemployed aunt. I'm doing my second year at university and my little sister is in secondary school. We approached a lawyer and he told us there's nothing we can do because our mother didn't have a will and she was married to our stepfather in community of property. My advice to mothers who remarry, please protect your children when you find a new father for them. When you die, your husbands mistreat your children. What is sad is that our mother was not employed and didn't have life covers. All the monies our father left was eaten by my stepfather buying endless cars. Life just changed from good to worse right in front of our eyes. I can't wait to complete my degree and work so I can take care of my little sister.
Yeah.
I guess she wasn't asking for advice. I guess she was just giving advice.
I guess so. I think she was also asking for advice. I think maybe on the sense of where you see, maybe they went and seeked legal counsel and sought legal counsel, and they didn't have anything that they were planning for. And I think maybe because the story we're getting is maybe a South African story, I don't know how. Maybe if we had to apply to the Zambian context, maybe they will have a say.
Yeah.
But I think maybe in South Africa, there maybe stipulates that whatever your spouse has
to the other person.
I think it's also probably the law that's here also,
in the
right?
UK, right?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think so. I'm not sure. We're getting quite a few of these stories. We need to brush up on our law.
Yeah.
But please let us know if you know, please let us know in the comments.
Yeah. And maybe if you are a lawyer, you're always invited to come on our show. And
yes, that would be very helpful.
We can quiz you on these things where we can at least give some good advice on certain things that are happening. I think this is a continuation on probably the
previous episode. Yeah. So we kept this because it's sort of talking about it from a different angle, from the children's point of view. So we thought, actually, this continues quite well with the other episode that we were talking about. So if you haven't listened to that, I would really recommend that you listen to it.
Yeah.
It's just in summary, it's titled "My Wife Will Not Put My Name on Her Title Deeds."
Yes. And I think this is now we're saying this can be a result of the worst case scenario. And this is what can happen if somebody comes with evil intentions. He's now on the title. In this case, he wasn't even in the title just because or based on
must have been married legally.
Married, yeah, and everything like that. And I think this is what we're saying, that look, marriage in and of itself is a beautiful thing, and we want. I think some of the times when we look at certain things like this, it's very easy for us to now start. There's this saying, throwing the baby with the bathwater. We now start to blame marriage than the person itself.
Yeah.
Who's in that situation, as in that the person who's abusing those kids or who's doing something that is not the right thing.
Yeah.
instead of that. And I think because of that, it becomes an issue of where we know that we live in a sinful world.
Yeah.
And we should be able to accept that, look, sin will flesh out even in marriages and in just any relationship in life, and sin will flesh out. And I think this is one of the things that why when we're always speaking from it from a biblical context, we have to also understand that, look, when we speak from it from a biblical context, we also have to understand that we are sinners. And because we are sinners, though it will flesh out in various ways, and our sin will be it will be on display as we going through marriage, relationships, in anything that we go through. So even like when we're speaking into this situation of where we're trying to now say, okay, how can something like this happen? And unfortunately it does. And I think this is why I think we always have to say, look, whenever you are getting married, some people even may get married with the right intentions.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes it's always, especially in a second marriage, I think with a second marriage, you have to come with, you've got some experience and a lot of information that you're coming with. So there has to be a level of where either some people need to be able to educate women, especially who are in a vulnerable state, of how they can protect themselves.
Yeah.
Because it's just not, my husband has died, I need to get married again. You're getting married with a lot of things that you need to consider.
Yeah.
You've got children who are there. So now how do you protect those children? You've got either now an estate that you have to protect in a particular way. And I don't know, maybe I think the law looks very unfair here, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'm missing something. I agree with you because it's not making sense. I mean, unless, like in our previous story, she did change the title deeds. Yeah. And the title deeds include both of them. And if that's the case, if she's died, the title, the property now belongs to him if there's no will, where she says, and I think this is where the law would be really helpful. But I think, like you said, babe, I think we do need to be very mindful in different scenarios. I mean, sometimes we have situations where maybe she wasn't married before. Maybe you've had children before. Yeah. Before you got married, then now you've gotten married, and this stepfather you're gonna have a stepfather or a stepmother. I think that's also another element to protect. It's not always just in the situation where they're married. Yeah. I think you have to protect them by by sussing out the kind of person that you're going to marry, whether it's a woman or a man. Yeah. I think you need to really be extra vigilant and look at all the possible scenarios and make sure that we do protect our children, whether it's the man or the woman, because this scenario could easily be flipped to it being, the father who died and then they had a stepmother. Yeah, it's a stepmother. And vice versa. They're still experiencing the same thing. But I think this is one of those things where when you're choosing a life partner, even if it is a situation where it's not even, there are no children involved, I think you still have to be careful, because unfortunately it looks like sometimes people might be in it for the wrong reasons. But anyway, that's another topic. But in relation to this, I think we need to be extra vigilant in how we pick our partners and be transparent from the very beginning, even with our children. So that, I think one of the things that maybe we don't do is, well, I think as Africans, we don't talk a lot about death. And rightly so. It's not a very comfortable conversation. Nobody wants to talk about it, and I don't want to talk about it. But actually, it's a really important conversation to be had. A really conversation to be had with as a couple. And I don't think, for example, you and I would have talked about it had it not been from life doing its thing on us. I think we wouldn't have talked about it in the depth that we probably have. But because we've as Africans, we have this thing like, well, what do you mean? You think I'm dying? Are you trying to kill me? But actually, this is a part of life. It is a difficult part of life, but it is a part of life. And I think having these conversations together as a couple, and even with children, especially when they're old enough to understand, at what age they're old enough, I think that's subjective, and that's quite a different one. I don't think anyone can put a number on that. But especially even when you've got stepmoms and stepchildren involved.
I don't want to like blame like the dead or something like that on this situation, but do you feel like the mother was a bit ignorant or relaxed, especially knowing that she's experienced a death of a partner, instead of now also being more vigilant? Because it's like you come with a life experience that in a marriage that maybe other people haven't experienced when they're getting married. You've lost a partner. So how can that information, how can you overlook that information?
I think I can see how it can be overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
I understand where you're coming from in some, like, obviously we're not trying to, look back and say how come these things did not trigger a thought process.
Yeah.
But I can sort of see how it can be. I had a point of how it can be overlooked. Because one, we don't talk about these things in our culture.
No, but
and
my
I know what
question
you're
is,
saying.
she's gone through it.
Yeah, but the other thing is, I don't think we're good at talking about our death. I think we are better at talking about if you died.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an easier, I don't know, like we all know we're going to die.
Yeah.
But I think we somehow, quote me if I'm wrong, find it easier to say if you died A, B, C, D rather than if I died.
Yeah. I agree. I agree on that situation. So like you're saying, it's much easier for us to talk about, let's say, even though we talk about it, it's just something that it just doesn't register to us. It just doesn't register to us in that particular way where we just understand that, look, death is something that we'll all experience if the Lord does not come. And that this is something that is inevitable, because there's, as people normally say, look, there's the only things that are certain in life is our us being born and us dying. And I think this is why, again, it's also trying to understand, like, look, if you're thinking, sometimes maybe we may think of it too much, but again, also on the other side, when we think about death, there has to be an aspect of, that's why I think the essence of the gospel even comes to forth and saying, look, if we're thinking about it in this particular way of death is coming, where are we going to spend eternity? And this is why I think the prevalence of the gospel is something that it hits home in the aspect of where we're saying death is around us, especially for us. Especially, let's say, in the African context, like I think we were even discussing, like, sometimes we just see notices of death and everything like that. I'm just like, is it just where we come from where people die? That's why you start to feel like that.
No,
and I'm saying, like, how can
the life
we
expectancy is significantly different.
Yeah, how can we be so immunized and not prepared? And I think
because we don't teach each other to have those conversations, babe.
Are we numb? Are we numb towards the aspect of death because it's so, like, there's an aspect of where, like, we have it so much to the point of where it becomes routine. Somebody dies, we have a funeral for 3 days, and then we just go on with life.
I see what you're saying, but I don't think it's, even though that should actually work the other way, make us plan more and make us have these conversations more and make us have wheels. But I just feel like that's almost like a taboo kind of topic. Like who goes to write a will at a young age? Like, it's just things that we don't have. Like, even think about it. Like, during our marriage counseling, I know I'm going off tangent somehow, but we talked about everything. We did talk about the vows and say until death do us part, which was, this is the part where you will separate and you can marry, but it was in that context of marriage. It wasn't talked about in sense of, actually writing, to help reduce, because a lot of problems you have, one of the points you made before was during weddings and funerals. So one of the things that you guys could start thinking about as a couple is writing your will. I mean, I know it's a hard thing. Even if I'm saying it right now, coming out of my mouth, I'm finding it very hard to actually articulate it. It's not feeling very comfortable. The words are not feeling comfortable coming out of my mouth right now. Yeah.
But do you think, like, maybe sometimes we reserve those conversations and saying, look, it's a happy moment. Let's enjoy in the happiness, and then while we're going with life,
who's gonna tell you then?
But while we're going in life, these conversations come in and saying, look,
point.
As in
That
we
is
are
part of
talking.
life.
I
So
agree
because
with
we
that.
talk about everything in marriage, we
Yeah.
talk about it, we prepare, we talk about, and I suppose that's one of the things, I suppose I see where you're coming from, because maybe, how I always, Lydia and I talk about how we feel like, the prep before marriage, it's some of these preps are under prepped, so there's a lot more content that can be put through. And I think this is one of those contents, because it's something that we are going to experience it. It's not even like, we talk about how to stop your man cheating, how to stop your woman from cheating, how to, all of those stuff, like those are not guaranteed are things that are going to happen in your it's like, when you're being, I know I'm going, I don't know if you're capturing my thought process, but we talk about, there's this
Things
thing in your mind and that says, make sure you're these other ideas, or make sure you're cooking, make sure you're doing this, make sure, otherwise it's gonna go, or she's gonna go, like whatever you get. But these are not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed your husband's gonna cheat. It's not guaranteed your wife's gonna cheat. It's not guaranteed you're gonna get sick. It's not guaranteed you're gonna have children. It's not guaranteed. Like, these are not guaranteed. But what is like guaranteed is that we are gonna die.
Yeah, if the Lord doesn't come. Yeah.
If the Lord doesn't come.
So I agree with that. So I think maybe also the people
I've said that. I'm not saying I want us to have another conversation. It's very uncomfortable.
Yeah, maybe also the people who are giving the advice on that have never experienced it in that sense of losing a spouse.
Or maybe we're used to. Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, and
that's a good point.
But my other aspect is,
that's a good point.
But
I think
maybe it's something that we need to also say. Okay, it doesn't mean that you have to. We have to wait for
experience
for us to talk about it.
But that's a good point, because most of the time you will get somebody who's a couple, a husband and a wife, who will teach you, or just maybe a woman, based on like the woman teaching you womanly stuff that they classify as womanly things. But you're right. I think sometimes, but maybe experience.
Okay, maybe again, this is another thing.
If you had somebody,
I feel like maybe we can talk on our side. Maybe there's some people who've had it.
That's true. That's very true.
And I think if you've had that conversation, maybe put it in the comments and maybe say, this is a conversation that's been
brought up about
when we're having
preparing for
marriage and everything.
If any one of us was to die, what would happen to our assets, our properties, and is there something that's been written down? Yeah,
but how do you prepare for that? How do you prepare for an end of a marriage? As in, nobody goes into marriage hoping that it will end.
I don't think you need to have a conversation every day.
Do we have to also have another conversation about divorce?
Well, no, I think that's different. It's not guaranteed. I mean, I think it's a good conversation to have.
Yeah.
I don't think, I don't want to divorce you. You don't want to divorce me, right? Just say yes. But I mean, if we would, I think this is where now you start talking about the prenups and stuff like that. So I think in terms of a conversation about divorce, that is a good conversation to be had. I'm not going to lie. I think it's not entertaining divorce, although some people might think that it is, but I don't think that's you saying let's have a conversation about divorce is bad. However, I would probably lean towards the other conversation and say I would rather we had the conversation about what would happen if one of us was to die.
Are you talking about just between the two of us? I'm talking about marriage preparation.
What's there to prepare about divorce?
Because we're talking about, I think we're saying that we're looking at all other aspects of what we consider as we're talking about all other aspects of what we consider can end a marriage.
No, that's different.
Yeah.
Because this one, the story is particularly related to a spouse death.
Yeah.
So yes, I agree with you in terms of, it's actually quite similar in terms of divorce, but the thing about divorce is both voices are still present, and I think that helps.
Yeah.
So I think that means you can both fight your angle. I go to my lawyer, you go to your lawyer, and I try and fight for my babies, you try and fight for your babies, however the dynamics of our relationships is.
Yeah.
And I think that is where sometimes but that's the conversation that we talked about in terms of what's the word? Like the other lady, like it's a bit, I agree with you. It's similar, but different at the same time. But there are great similarities, especially if you come to in this situation. Let's say they were married no, let's say she was alive and it was the stepfather and then they separated.
Yeah.
What would happen to her assets and what would happen to the children, and what if he wants a claim of it? And because they're legally married, it's 50-50.
Yeah.
Because that would be the thing. But at least that's unlikely to really cause too much of a problem compared to being all your money being taken, like it's just in this scenario. But I hear you.
Yeah.
I think it's a wise conversation to have.
Yeah.
Even if you're not planning for divorce. But I don't know. What do you guys think? We're married. Should we talk about what we would do if we divorced? I don't know.
Maybe sometimes you just have those conversations when those conversations come. And I think that's why some people more and mainly talk about death. Maybe they'll say, I don't think it's wise, because I think there's a level of where, especially when you're having children, it affects a lot of people. So you always have to have a conversation of where
divorce, you mean?
No, just death in itself. But I think also that's why I think being around people who are Christians, and if I think people have been people who are plugging into you, they can also help in those situations.
Yeah.
And give the best advice to see what's fair. And I think one of the things that I probably like about the law of Zambia, as much as maybe other laws are very different, it seems to be a bit fair.
Yeah, everybody gets a piece of the pie.
Everybody gets a piece of the pie. And I think sometimes maybe, I don't know, maybe women will be. And I think there was a time where our laws were basically like that, where it's either, and I think it was also to the disadvantage of the woman, where it was just brothers and sisters will come and just grab and say, this is our relatives' things. So you guys figure out what you have to do. And I think that's also a situation where it can be a disadvantage. And I think also we need to also understand, as much as we're also looking and saying the law is not also perfect.
No.
There's always going to be limitations in everywhere. And sometimes if you can know how to maneuver around the law, you can always find a way of loopholes that will always benefit you. And I think this is another situation that we're saying, even a will, sometimes some people will try their very best to do certain things. It doesn't mean that if you have a will and everything like that, some people will try to force your hand when they're seeing you're sick. They'll try to basically make you change the will and all those things. So those things, as much as we're trying to emphasize on them, we're not also saying that these are things that you should continuously put your whole eggs in those situations. And I think on this story particularly, it's sad that this situation has happened. And we actually thank God that there was a relative who could help them.
Yeah.
Even though the help is maybe saying you're dropping from one side a level of wealth to a place of where you're now you feel like you're suffering.
Yeah.
But again, there's also another side of where we also understand that suffering is not forever. Let's go into that mindset of suffering is not forever, especially for the believer. Even like we can say suffering in the sense of in this world, there'll always be better days. But even though it's not in this world, there's always an aspect of once we go out of this world, we're in a better place.
Yeah.
So let's not fixate so much on the aspect of I'm hurt. They've taken all these things. Everything is unfair on me. Then I can't do anything. And then you just basically stop. But you have to fight in the sense of just saying, look, okay, these are the cards that has happened. We tried our best and everything like that. We've gone to the Lord. They've said anything. There's yes, grieve about the situation, but we always have to pick up our boots and now say, what do we do next? In this situation? It's sad that they've lost this.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes even like the same thing maybe you may be fighting for, it may be, it's good. It's a legacy thing because it's attached to your parents. But again, it's also a good thing that maybe you can also start something for yourself. And in the future, you can also push and all that stuff. And I think, unfortunately, the law is something that has gone to your disadvantage on this situation as you are grieving.
Definitely encourage them to make sure they've they've checked and gotten advice from a lawyer. And
don't just go to one lawyer.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes maybe some people may, and one lawyer is not well versed, go and seek other counsel and say, okay, we went to this lawyer, we don't feel like whatever the situation, that the advice that we're given was adequate to our situation.
Yeah.
Ask and all that stuff and see directions the way you can go, and see maybe there's a good thing of where you can also see different counsels, and through that you may find something different.
Yeah.
It's not just through advice of one person.
Yeah.
And see that. And I think this is what we're saying, like even from that other situation where we're saying that the asking of that man in the odd was not wrong. But we also need to say his intentions of why he was asking. We can see the fruit of that through this situation. And if we just look at in the story, I'm just like, this story is really sad, because I'm just like, the wife dies and he's got already a girlfriend
who has 4 children,
and bringing them in, and then it's like,
and then chucks the others out. That's almost that's like inhumane. Like, that's
I know,
mean.
I know.
On another level, like, that's just, something's not right. Something's not right whatsoever. And I think there must be somehow a law to help defend some of these things. But unfortunately, sometimes people have lost out where things have not been put in place to protect. And unfortunately, also, she says there was no life insurance. And if, that's also another thing that's actually helpful, to be fair. Again, another thing we don't talk about until we're much older is life insurance. And actually, it can be quite helpful.
Yeah. So my other question is, how do we now foster conversations like this, especially for people who've either experienced it directly or indirectly? How do you foster such conversations without
looking like you're planning for someone to go?
Without looking like you're planning for somebody to go, or
looking suspicious.
No, because some people will just be like, like where, like sometimes where you're talking about something because you've experienced it, and they're like, I think I haven't experienced that, so it's like no one wants to talk about that.
We don't have to. And I think one thing is, we don't have to have experienced it to have the conversation. But unfortunately, sometimes experience tends to be the teacher, but sometimes it's too late, and I think this is a good conversation to be had. Even in courtship, you can have to understand people's views. I think I remember we had this conversation, like, okay, so what would happen if, one of us died? And then I think it was easy for when we said, if we both died. No, if one of us died, it makes sense in terms of the children, like where the children would go. And we said, what would happen if both of us died? Where would the children go? And then both of us had different answers. And therefore, that was a point of tension. So we had to discuss that. And I don't think up to now we have finished that discussion.
Because the discussion also, we have to look at other things also.
What do you mean other things?
There are lots of things, and I'm saying this is why in marriage there are lots of discussions that come into play. But
we haven't finished that discussion. But that is an important discussion, because otherwise somebody's going to make the decision for us, even when we're not there. But at least, you know what, in life sometimes, I think there is an element of you can plan, and sometimes we do need to take a chill pill. In a sense of I don't know why that came into my mind. I haven't said that word in ages. Please excuse me. Sometimes we need to trust God. Because sometimes we can try and plan so much and say, if you died, if this person died, if we both went, so this is what will happen. This is what will happen. We do need to have an overarching idea, but at the same time, I don't know what the balance is, and I pray that God can give us all wisdom. But we should not forget the hand of God. We should not forget that God will take care of his children. If you made a mistake and you forgot to write a will, and you didn't write a will, it can go pear-shaped. But at the same time, the one who oversees it all, our Father, will sort it out.
And he knows all things. So we have to rest in that.
We do have to have. But I I'm not saying we shouldn't have this conversation, but I think and also they're important to have, and they help us out. And also I think they do prevent a lot of trauma, this is quite traumatic for them to go through with the little sister and things like that. And there's so that I can see more benefits to having such conversations and writing out a will than I can actually see the negatives. There's more pros than cons. There's pros and cons for each, but I think there's more pros and cons.
But do you think also
More
this
pros
thing
than
is
cons,
is something of where I always say cultural liberty to have
What do you mean?
these discussions? There's no overarching idea of how things need to be expressed
In terms of from the Bible?
What happens to...
No, actually, I don't think we have that. Do we have any examples of...
The one
we
I
do
have
have
is
like
the issue of Ruth and Naomi, where
we
see,
have that. We have a lot of land being passed on generation to generation.
Yes, but we're saying, do we look at that issue as an overbearing situation of how all generations and all cultures should now follow that? Or should we look at it in the context of saying this was Jewish law and this is what Jewish law is?
What do you think?
I look at it and saying there are certain things that are Jewish law that apply to Jews.
Okay.
And I think we cannot take those laws and then now say we apply them to us and say this is how we're supposed. Maybe it's a good situation of how we can. It's an example, but I also think there are certain things of in our culture where we have different laws of how we express certain things. They may not be sinful in the sense of where it's taking us away from God, but it's just a way of how we organize ourselves on a cultural basis on these situations. And I feel like maybe there is a bit of cultural liberty, but we're saying even like about marriage, I feel like marriage, there is an aspect of marry a believer, but the way we express our marriage, it doesn't mean that you always have to go to a church to get married. It doesn't mean that you always have to do ABCD and we have to always look at it from that situation. But we also understand that there is an overarching aspect of where it's saying marriage is between a man and a woman. We can't run away from that. And I think those oversee cultural norms because we're saying this is what God has designed. And that's what I'm trying to say. But I think it's also a good example. We can say these are good examples, but I think it's also understanding that we have to analyze our culture and say, oh, what are they doing something that is unjust, inhumane, or saying things? And we look at what scripture is also trying to portray of how things should be done. And then we say, can we apply these things in the Christian context? And how should we do them to the best of our ability? To be fair. Because here it's about fairness. And I think even though as much as you're trying to be fair, everybody will feel like they've been done wrong. Death is something, it brings a lot of complications. But we also understand that, look, as much as the complications are in this world, when the time comes when we're with our Savior, there won't be any complications because we will know that we will get our fair due. Because of we're saying that once we are one in Christ, and then when we go to be with Him, all the things of this world will be passed away, and we'll have the hope. Our hope will become real, because we'll be in the presence of our Savior. The unfairness of this world is something that is evident, as we have said.
Yeah, definitely.
But let's not rest on the aspects of the unfairness and the challenges that we see in this world. But let's hold on to God, who is just and who is fair and who will help us, even though the world wants to go in an unfair direction. He will help us in those situations, and He will walk with us in those things. So for us, our prayer for these people is that, just seek God in this situation, because there can be a lot of just bitterness and a lot of discouragement as you're going through life. And I'm glad He's just saying He wants to finish His university. She wants to finish her university so that she could be able to take care of her sister and do the best that she can. And I think God will also honor that. And we pray and trust that indeed those things can come to pass. Yeah. Anything else you want to add?
No, oh, actually, I don't know if it was she. I lied.
I think
It
it's
doesn't
he, yeah.
say. You
It
think it's
doesn't tell
it
us, yeah.
doesn't tell us.
That's what I was saying,
I
yeah.
assumed.
Yeah.
No, I think you've summarized it really well then.
Yeah. So, like we always say, thank you for taking your time to listen to us. We're always grateful for the support that we get from you. And like always, we always say, like, subscribe,
Share.
and yeah. And until next time, thank you and God bless. Bye bye.
Bye.